Good evening. The date is Saturday, January 24th, 2026. From the news desk, the situation. Well, it remains fluid and, frankly, quite grave.
It does.
In just the past 2 weeks, we've seen a convergence of high-intensity kinetic warfare in Eastern Europe and, at the same time, unprecedented diplomatic friction within the Western alliance.
A moment of heavy consequence, that's for sure. And, helping us sift through all of this complexity is our partner for this deep dive, Stylo News.
That's right. This deep dive is powered by Stylo News and their ProWave AI. Now, for anyone who hasn't heard of it, Stylo isn't just another news aggregator.
Not at all.
It's actually the consumer version of Stylo Intel Ops software that was originally built for enterprise, government, and military operations.
Which is really the key point. It means you, as a listener, are getting access to a tool that was literally designed for global decision makers.
We're talking pattern-of-life analysis, real-time feeds that are deduplicated, and AI-driven insights from, over 250 sources.
In more than 20 languages. It's designed to cut right through the noise.
And looking at the headlines this morning, noise feels like an understatement. So let's drop the anchor persona and really get into this. We need to unpack what's happened because the world looks very different today than it did just a few weeks ago.
It really does. We have a war in Europe that is somehow escalating and being negotiated at the exact same time.
And a NATO alliance that seems to be cracking over real estate, of all things.
We will get to the real estate, which is wild, but we have to start with the war on the ground. Literally today, January 24th.
Right, because if you're checking your phone this morning, you see two headlines that just don't seem to fit together.
What are they?
Headline 1, peace talks begin in Abu Dhabi. Headline 2, Kyiv hammered by massive missile barrage. How do those two things even coexist?
It feels contradictory, but in military strategy, specifically Russian doctrine, it's entirely consistent. This is escalate to de-escalate playing out in real time.
So the barrage today on Kyiv, it was targeting energy infrastructure, heat, water, in the middle of winter.
Exactly. Moscow is trying to create a humanitarian crisis at the precise moment diplomats are sitting down at the table.
So it's negotiation by fire.
Precisely. It's a coercive signal. The message to the negotiators is, settle this now, on our terms, or the civilian cost becomes absolutely unbearable. It's designed to create panic.
Which then pressures the leadership to make concessions they otherwise wouldn't.
Yes. And this isn't a one-off event. Looking at the pattern of life analysis from Stylo, which tracks the rhythm of these attacks, the last 2 weeks have been incredibly intense, not just in the capital.
Right. The intensity has ramped up across the board. If we go back to January 9th, we saw the use of the Oreshnik missile on Lviv.
Okay, for listeners who aren't military buffs, can you clarify what Oreshnik is? We hear the name, but what does it actually change on the battlefield?
It's not just a bigger explosion. It's a delivery system. It's a hypersonic ballistic missile.
So the key here isn't just the impact, it's the speed and the trajectory. It's nearly impossible to intercept with the standard air defense systems Ukraine has.
And by hitting Lviv, which is right next to the Polish border, Russia is sending a signal that the safe rear of Ukraine
Doesn't exist anymore.
Lviv has always been the logistics hub, the place where refugees went.
Exactly. And hitting it is a message to Poland and to NATO as much as it is to Kyiv. It says, we can touch your doorstep.
And then just the next day, January 10th, they completely pivoted south to Odessa.
Oh, right. And that was a clear shift in targeting. They went after port infrastructure and, crucially, civilian ships. They hit the Matilda, a Greek-owned tanker.
That seems incredibly risky, hitting a Greek ship. That's hitting a NATO member's commercial asset. Doesn't that trigger some kind of massive diplomatic fallout?
You'd think so. It is risky, but it's a calculated risk. They're betting that NATO won't go to war over a single private tanker.
So the strategy there is economic strangulation.
It's about severing Ukraine's economic lifeline, its ability to export grain, other goods. If shipping insurance rates skyrocket because of these attacks, no captain is going to dock in Odessa. It freezes the economy.
It's total war economics.
Yeah.
But here's where the story shifts, because Ukraine isn't just sitting there taking these hits. I was reading about their new defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov. This guy is not a general.
No, he's a former IT entrepreneur, and putting him in charge of the Ministry of Defense is a massive signal of how Ukraine sees the future of this war.
Fedorov isn't interested in a traditional artillery duel.
He wants to automate the kill chain.
I saw a number in the briefing that just stopped me cold. His stated goal is to inflict 50,000 Russian casualties. A month? Is Is that even possible?
It's a staggering number. I mean, for context, that's a Vietnam War's worth of casualties every couple of months. But Fedorov's argument is mathematical.
How so?
He believes that through advanced drone warfare swarms, FPV drones, AI targeting, they can make the war physically unsustainable for the Russian army. It's not about taking land.
It's about processing targets. That's a chilling way to put it. It sounds almost like a factory line.
It's the reality of algorithmic warfare. We saw a glimpse of this on January 13th with that strike on Taganrog.
Which is deep inside Russia, right?
Very deep. Ukrainian drones hit the Atlant Aero factory. Now, this wasn't a random terror strike. This factory is a critical supplier of Russian military drones.
So Ukraine is using its drones to destroy the factory that makes the drones that are attacking them.
They're attacking the supply chain at the source.
And speaking of supply chains, this is one of those truth is stranger than fiction details. The reports on where these drone parts are coming from. It's messy.
Messy is being polite. Investigative reports have confirmed that Chinese factories are supplying critical drone components, motors, chips, batteries, to both Russia and Ukraine simultaneously.
Wait, hold on. So the same factory in Shenzhen could be powering the drone that attacks a tank and also the drone defending it.
In many cases, yes, it's a shadow supply chain. These aren't direct government sales. They flow through intermediaries in Central Asia or the Middle East.
But it highlights a bizarre reality. For some Chinese manufacturers, this war is just a market opportunity.
It complicates sanctions immensely. You can't just block a company without potentially hurting your allies' supply chain, too.
That's a fascinating paradox. Meanwhile, on the ground, the Russians are trying to adapt to this. I keep seeing pictures of these dandelion tanks.
Ah, yes, the dandelions. The nickname for tanks fitted with these elaborate, multi-layered anti-drone cages.
They look like moving chicken coops.
They really do, and British intelligence has been scathing about them. They're calling it a sign of desperation. The cages make the tank heavy, hard to maneuver. The turret can barely even rotate.
But it shows they're terrified of these cheap drones.
They're welding scrap metal to multi-million-dollar tanks, hoping to stop a $500 drone. It's a perfect visual for how the cost of war has been flipped on its head.
Okay, so we have this high-tech, high-attrition grind in the East. But when we zoom out, the political situation in the West is arguably even more volatile. We have to talk about Greenland.
We absolutely have to talk about Greenland.
If you told me 5 years ago that the NATO alliance would be shaking because of a real estate deal in the Arctic, I would have thought it was a satire sketch. But this is real.
It's very real. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen a massive transatlantic fracture. President Trump has renewed his ambition to acquire Greenland.
But why? I mean, is there an actual strategy here? Because from the outside, it looks like a big block of ice.
It's easy to dismiss it, but strategically, it makes a terrifying kind of sense. Greenland is crucial for the GIU gap. That's Greenland, Iceland, UK.
The naval choke point in the North Atlantic.
Where Russian subs have to pass through. But more importantly now, if you're worried about hypersonic missiles from Russia or China, the shortest path to America is over the Arctic. Controlling Greenland is about missile defense.
Okay, so the logic is there. But the method, threatening tariffs on European allies if they don't sell, that feels aggressive.
That's where the fracture is happening. The negotiations with Denmark collapsed on January 15th, and the U.S. didn't just walk away. The administration threatened economic punishment.
And Europe isn't taking this quietly.
Not at all. Spain's Prime Minister Sanchez explicitly warned that this destabilizes NATO. You have allies threatening allies over territory. It undermines the entire Article 5 guarantee.
The idea that an attack on one is an attack on all.
Exactly. If the U.S. is economically attacking Denmark, what is Article 5 really worth?
And this isn't just words. There are troops moving, right?
That's the concerning part. British Royal Marines are conducting training exercises in Norway and the Arctic right now.
On paper, for Russian deterrence.
On paper, but given the tension, analysts are reading it as a signal to Washington as well. The UK is signaling that they are committed to the sovereignty of the Arctic nations.
It really feels like the West is fracturing into the U.S. and the rest of the West.
That is a very accurate description, and it was pretty much formalized today, January 24th, with the release of the new U.S. National Defense Strategy.
I skimmed the executive summary.
Yeah.
Blunt.
It's a pivotal shift. The core takeaway is America first, but specifically in military deployment. It explicitly deprioritizes the direct defense of Europe.
So what does that mean for a country like Poland or Germany? They rely on American bases?
It means the U.S. is shifting the burden. The strategy categorizes Russia not as a primary existential threat to the U.S., but as a manageable threat.
So the message to Europe is, this is your backyard, you handle it.
You handle the security. We're looking at the Western Hemisphere and the Pacific. It's effectively an end to the post-World War II security guarantee.
And Europe seems to be getting the message. They're acting with a level of autonomy and aggression we haven't seen in a long time.
It's a forced autonomy. Look at the UK. On January 14th, reports surfaced that British special forces are preparing to physically seize Shadow Fleet oil tankers in the English Channel.
I want to pause on that. Seizing tankers?
Yeah.
That sounds like piracy, or at least privateering. Is that even legal?
It pushes the boundaries of maritime law, certainly. But the legal argument they're making is that these ships are violating sanctions and lack proper insurance.
But the real reason?
The reality is, the UK plans to seize the oil proceeds to fund Ukraine. It's taking the economic war and making it physical. It's an incredibly aggressive move.
And Germany? Usually they're so cautious.
Not anymore. They just expelled a Russian diplomat after arresting a woman named Alona W. for espionage on January 22nd. They're cracking down hard.
And then there's Norway.
Norway's taking a fascinating hybrid approach. They're refusing to build a physical border fence with Russia, opting for high-tech monitoring instead.
But at the same time,
They are pouring NASAM's air defense systems into Ukraine. Europe is realizing the American security umbrella might be folding up, so they're all hurriedly buying their own raincoats.
that is a great analogy.
Yeah.
So let's connect all this back to the peace talks. Because despite all the fighting, people are still talking.
It's a flurry of activity. You had the Paris summit on January 6th, then back-channel meetings at Davos on the 20th.
Between Kremlin envoy Kirill Dmitriev and U.S. reps, right?
Yes, and now these trilateral talks in Abu Dhabi.
But talks need common ground. What is Russia actually asking for? We know they want territory, but is it just land?
This is where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a bit strange to the Western ear. Russia has officially stated a key condition for ending the war.
And it's not just neutrality or territory.
No, they are demanding the protection of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, specifically the Moscow Patriarchate branch, and the repeal of Ukrainian laws that target it.
That feels incredibly specific. Why make religion a deal breaker in a war about geopolitics?
Because for Putin, this is about legacy and domestic legitimacy. By framing it as protecting the faithful, Moscow frames the war as a moral, a spiritual crusade to its own people. It plays very well on Russian state TV.
But it's a trap for Ukraine.
Of course, it's much harder for Ukraine to compromise on this because it touches on internal sovereignty and national identity. If they agree, they are essentially allowing Moscow to dictate their internal religious laws.
It gives Russia a permanent lever of influence inside their society.
Exactly. And speaking of Ukraine's stance, we just passed a very grim milestone. 1,418 days.
1,418 days. That number is symbolic because it equals the exact duration of the Great Patriotic War, World War II, for the Soviets.
And that carries immense psychological weight for the Russian public. It justifies the hardship. We suffered for 1,418 days before we can do it again.
And despite that, Ukraine is holding the line. No ceded territory, no loss of sovereignty.
They're betting that Fedorov's drone strategy, that 50,000 casualty target, can inflict enough pain to force Russia to drop those maximalist demands.
So it's a race.
It is a race between attrition and coercion. Can Ukraine bleed the Russian army faster than Russia can freeze the Ukrainian population?
And looking at the global players, it's not just the big three. I saw a note about South Korea.
Yes, South Korea is in the middle of a massive domestic crisis. Their former President Yoon was just sentenced for that failed coup attempt. It's chaotic there.
Yet, on January 20th, they signed an agreement with Italy to cooperate on defense and AI to indirectly support Ukraine.
It shows how solidified these alliances are becoming. South Korea knows that if Russia wins, North Korea gets emboldened. They can't afford to step back, even if their own house is on fire.
Meanwhile, Russia is opening its doors to China.
Visa-free tourism for Chinese citizens started on January 21st. It's a pure economic pivot. If the West closes the door, Russia opens the window to the East. They're trying to replace European tourist money with yuan.
So let's try to synthesize this for everyone listening. There are so many moving parts. If you're trying to predict the next 6 months, what's the through line?
Well, if we look at the decision makers, you see three distinct trajectories. The U.S. is pushing for a deal, but pulling back militarily to focus on the Western Hemisphere. They want out of Europe.
Right. Fortress America.
Precisely. Meanwhile, Europe is being forced into rapid strategic autonomy. They're hunting spies and seizing tankers because they fear a NATO fracture. They're preparing to go it alone.
And Russia and Ukraine.
They are locked in that race we just mentioned. It's a violent sprint to the negotiating table. Both sides are trying to create facts on the ground before a potential ceasefire is forced on them.
It feels like the old world order is just gone. We're in a transition period, and those are famously dangerous.
Extremely dangerous. The Greenland crisis isn't just about an island, it's about the cohesion of the West. If the US and Europe are fighting trade wars over territory, their leverage in Abu Dhabi weakens. Putin knows this.
So every missile strike on Kyiv is time to exploit that division.
He's betting that the West will fight itself before it fights him.
Well, so what should we be watching for in the next week or so?
Watch Abu Dhabi. But don't just watch the press releases. Watch the side conversations. If the US and Russia align on a peace plan that Europe or Ukraine hates, does the US try to force Ukraine's hand?
Or does the Western alliance shatter first over the Greenland dispute?
That is the trillion-dollar question. And here's a thought to leave you with. We talk about drone warfare and missile defense, but those reports show that Chinese components are in everyone's hardware.
Right.
If the global supply chain is that integrated, can you ever really have a victory against a supplier that also feeds your own defense industry?
That's an uncomfortable question.
Yeah.
It suggests that modern war might not have a winner, just profitable suppliers.
It does, and that's why we do this. Before we sign off, I want to bring it back to how we know all this stuff. Stylo News.
Right. If you want to track these developments, the Greenland talks, the drone strikes, you can't just rely on a single feed. The algorithm on your social media is feeding you what it thinks you want to see, not what's happening.
And Stylo gives you that Stylo Intel Ops power in your pocket.
Yeah.
It's customizable intelligence,
Yeah.
vector search capabilities, access to hundreds of sources, plus X.
It's AI-powered news on demand. You can check it out at stylonews.com. It really is worth it to stay ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Thank you for listening to this deep dive. It's a complex world out there, but we hope we made it a little bit clearer tonight.
Keep asking questions. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover next, let us know.
Huh.
And follow Stylo News on social media. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next deep dive. Goodbye.